What's up, everybody? God bless. Welcome back to Let's Talk. Today, I have a really good friend of mine, James Corrales. How you doing, my man?
Hey, brother. God bless you, man. I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing great, bro. I like calling you James, so let's stick to James.
That sounds good, bro. Sounds good.
Awesome, man. So, for those listeners out there watching and don't know who you are, tell us a little bit about yourself, man.
Yeah, my name is James Corrales. I'm 34 years old, and I've known Richard for better part half of my life, even more so, maybe. I don't
Man,
know how long now.
it's been
It's
a
been a
while.
long time. We go way back, and well, right now I currently reside in Portland, Oregon, alongside my beautiful wife. So we're over here
Awesome.
in the beautiful Pacific Northwest. We got 3 beautiful children, and yeah, that's pretty much us. We serve the Lord over here in ministry, are able to pastor a beautiful congregation, and yeah, we're blessed. We can't complain. Living through this quarantine, this pandemic, but blessed more than ever.
Amen, bro. No, it's good to know that you guys are safe, that you're doing well. And
Amen.
Pacific Northwest is a beautiful area. That's
Yeah,
to say the least.
yeah,
Right?
for
So,
sure.
my man James, bro. So you mentioned you serve the Lord. You're out there preaching the word. I remember visiting you guys every now and then, and you were into football, you were into skateboarding, all that stuff. How did you go from this like athletic person who was into all these other things to serving God?
Oh man, that was a process, to say the least. That was a process because I'd always been involved with sports. I grew up from like the age of 9 to the age of 16. I grew up in this small town in Colorado, Fort Morgan, where we currently have a church there as well. All you did in that town was basketball, football, and skateboarding. And that was about it. So I was very much into that and always knew about the things of the Lord, obviously, because I grew up in a Christian home, but I never really had that personal encounter, what they say, that one-on-one with the Lord. And I never really had that. When I was 16, we moved to Central Florida. And, my father started pastoring a beautiful church there in Orlando. And even then I took for granted so many things that were around me, where the Lord was trying to, get my attention. It's not that the Lord needed anything from me, but he wanted rather, so
Yeah.
I'm what is known as a late bloomer. And I'll admit that. That's why whenever I see those, young people that, they're struggling and, we pray for them and we watch over them and whatnot. But man, we don't lose hope because I'm a living example of that.
Something that you mentioned about being a late bloomer, I identify with that a lot. And I think that's something that uh, us as Christians sometimes tend to look down upon. There's like an expectation that you have to be super close to God at a certain young age, or at a certain time in life, you need to be this or that. What can you
Right.
say to a youth or somebody who hasn't had that personal encounter with God? If there's anything you could tell them right now?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I completely get what you're saying about, how sometimes, not even so much society, but even our own culture within church,
Yeah.
sometimes we tend to look down on late bloomers, and sometimes we won't say it, but the way that we feel inside. So with me, it's always been kind of where, the world has this saying that the Lord or God works in mysterious ways. I'm not so much, I'm not I don't proclaim that all the time, but I do say this, that the Lord definitely works in great ways. And, and when I see his greatness, his goodness, I see examples, youth and people, young people that are going through a certain stage or season in life. And although me, like a person, not even as a pastor, but just as a human being or a fellow Christian, even though my eyes can't see it at that moment, I try to put myself back in that position and not forget where the Lord brought me from, and I know that there's hope, because at the end of the day, that's what we preach. We preach the message of good news, of hope. And it's not what I'm going to be able to do to change that person, but sooner, and hopefully sooner rather than later, the word of God begins to transform. So I would say to that person to not let up, to don't desist, to not give up. You'll hear constantly people in your life saying, oh, God has a purpose for you. You'll hear another phrase that's very common. God knows what he's doing. He's taking you through a process. And all these phrases to me became kind of they were redundant, they were overused, but it wasn't until I had that personal encounter with the teacher of teachers, with Jesus Christ that, that I began to understand, oh, well, such and so was right about this. And I began to see that the Lord indeed had a purpose and a plan for my life. So from the people looking outside in, be patient, because who are we to not be patient with others when the Lord was so patient with us? And for those that are in the box looking out, only Jesus can save you, but Jesus can't save you all by himself, meaning not that he doesn't have the authority or the power, but meaning that you got to do your part. So sooner or later, you're going to have to bring something to the table. And you might be asking yourself, well, what does God bring to the table? And I want to tell you, I want to be very clear about this. And I don't want to take too much time in this question, but God not only brings something to the table, God brings the table. He brings the table itself, and he sets it down, and then it's what you bring. And so when you look at it from that, like if we start from that point, then we know that God has something special in store for each and every one of us.
I always saw you as in a way, like as a type of an example of how I should live my life. Just because you were into sports, I love sports, you were always, like into that kind of stuff. And I appreciated that. And when I first heard that you were going to go into the ministry, I was really happy for you, because honestly, if you would have told me James is going to be a minister, I was like, what? Him?
That's not going to happen.
Like, wait, what? So honestly, like when I first heard that you were going to be a minister, I truly was happy for you, because like to me that was like, wow, that means God has really changed his life in a powerful way. And if he can do that with him, he can do that with me. I identified with that when I first heard that news. But I want you to tell me that experience, bro. How was that calling? Like, how did you know God was calling you into that ministry? Like, how was that experience?
I think that one of the things that sometimes we try to pinpoint are those moments in life that, go back to and say, okay, this was specifically when this happened, and this was specifically when this other thing happened. With me, it was kind of like just giving myself away to the Lord. It was part of that process. And again, I got married young. I was 22 years old. I was living in Orlando, Florida. My wife was living in Miami, and I didn't want to live in Miami. She didn't want to live in Orlando. So we moved to Houston. We just kind of looked at the map. We chose that city, and then we went out. I'd be a liar today if I told you that I sat down or that I kneeled down and prayed about it. I didn't. We just kind of, honeymoon was over. We went to Houston. My sister was there. I had some family and friends, and I fell into this kind of pattern of work life. But I was focusing so much on that in the first 6 months of my marriage. But then at the same time, I was still kind of ignoring the things that God had in store for me. So I ended up changing jobs and whatnot. And I just kind of gave myself away to the Lord. One day, I remember I sat down with my pastor, who was Brother Franklin Rivera. He was the pastor there at the main church, the central church there in Houston, Texas at the time, with his father, Luis Rivera. And I sat down with him one time, and I was just having like an open heart with him. I told him, listen, I just don't feel worthy. And I remember he said these words to me. He said, and that's the thing, James, you're not. And that kind of like, I was expecting maybe like a little pep talk, like a little bring me up or something. And yeah, like, and then I was like, wait a minute. And then he kind of went into saying, not only you're not worthy, but, none of us are, but he is worthy. I felt like I had so much catching up to do because I had wasted so much time. I'd been doing the wrong things. Been doing the wrong things for the wrong reasons. I couldn't even put myself in the bracket of people that say, oh yeah, I did the wrong things for the good reasons. No, for me, it was kind of like, I was just, if you wanted to look for a liar, I was a liar, a hypocrite. I was just somebody who didn't respect. And it was all that, the Lord brought me from. And all these years of listening to the word, kind of like a lot of things God was awakening in me. I don't know if that makes sense, but he was kind of doing that, working inside of me. And then I began to feel like this desperate emotion. I remember that it would happen when we would go on vacation, my wife and I. And I'm not, to anybody who might be watching, I'm not saying that when you go on vacation, that's when you got to be extra sensitive to the voice of God. No, because a lot of people say, I'm going on vacation, I'm going to shut off my, I'm not going to be connected to work, to church, whatever. But for me personally, it was like I'd go on vacation with my wife. It was just her and I, and then we'd be there. And then like these 10 or 15 seconds of like intense desperation would kick in, where I'd always be in a public place. And all I would be able to see were souls. I don't know if that makes sense, but it was like I would see like, people that were living life, but they weren't really living. They were just kind of existing. I began to understand that the Lord was putting burden on me. It was like a burden that wasn't there. I mean, I knew the importance of soul winning, and I knew
Yes.
the importance of serving the Lord and all that. But for me to actually stand up and say, "Oh, I got a burden, I got a passion, and I got a desperation for people who are getting lost, and I got to do something." No, that wasn't me. I mean, I wasn't found in that group, but it was like God slowly tugging at my heart. And like you said, Richard, I mean, never, man, never in a million years. Like if you would have said, you want to be a pastor, anybody who knew James Corrales before going into ministry or even getting married would know. Anybody who thought they knew me, because even I thought I knew myself, would say, James, a pastor? Nah, that's not him. I mean, maybe he'll be playing music in a church, or maybe he'll be doing, but as a pastor, and it surprised me. I'll tell you what, it surprised me out of the most, but it was the Lord, working in me and through me.
Now that you're in Portland, man, when you got there, what were some of the early challenges that you had to face?
To answer that, I would have to divide it in three sections, if you will. And so I would begin physical. The reason why I say physical is because there was definitely a challenge there. I'd lived in Colorado for a while when, my preteens and part of my teens. And I was used to the cold, but you got to keep in mind that from, 15, 16, all the way to 22, I was in Florida, and I'd gotten used to, the beach. You're from Florida, brother. I mean, you know what I'm talking about. The weather, you get used to that. So that in of itself was a challenge when I ended up moving to Portland, because it's not so much the snow, but it definitely, the climate, it changes. And also it's a very rainy city. For those of you guys that don't know the Pacific Northwest, it's a lot of rain and a lot of gray days. Emotionally, I think there was definitely a culture. In Florida, you have a lot of Spanish-speaking people, a lot of Hispanic culture, Latino
Yeah.
influence. Even in Houston, it might not be as Caribbean, but it's definitely a lot of Central Americans that speak Spanish, and the food and everything. And then we moved to Portland, that's predominantly Anglo-Saxon community, Asian community. So there was that culture, difference, if you will, and that presented its challenges, and also the distance, which brought forth solitude. All my family was in Florida back then, and although we're just a call away and a message away, just knowing that we were way out there, that presented its challenges. My wife was 5 months pregnant when we got to Portland. Man, she is a warrior. I'll tell you what, not because she's my wife, but she's a warrior because we never had my mother-in-law here, my mother. We didn't have like a grandma, an aunt, or somebody. They come and go a couple months, a couple weeks rather, and then they leave. But that presented a challenge in of itself as well. So that distance factor was definitely something that we struggled with. And then I would say spiritually, when you're out in the field, there are things that textbooks can't prep you for. So I would say lack of experience made me more God dependent. Those are kind of the challenges, or at least some of them that we faced.
Right. As a minister, how hard has it been for you to adjust into like the online spectrum with the whole streaming and stuff towards the congregation?
It hasn't been hard adjusting to the kind of virtual platforms and this virtual experience, but it has been interesting. Hardship, opens the doors for creativity. So hardship sometimes brings forth creativity. So I think this that we're living in right now, these times, has definitely awakened the creative side of more than one person. The word that comes to mind, though, Richard, is moldable. Because if we look at the church from the beginning of time, we beyond the book of Acts, when the church has been established, we look at people that have been followers of God, and they have been moldable. They have been, and I look at that word, and it simply means capable of being molded. It says, like earth or clay or other soft material. And then look what it says, capable of resuming original shape after stretching or compression. So I think it's definitely been interesting. We're still living it. God has blessed us beyond measure. It's presented its obstacles, obviously, but we're gonna continue to maintain a moldable figure. We're clay, and if this is what he wants us to do right now, this is what we're gonna do. If he wants us to keep on going for the near or distant future, we're going to keep on doing it. And then if we have to resume that original shape or adjust, even if we don't go back to the same and things are different, I think that right now, more than ever, we got to be sensitive enough to the voice of God to see what it is that he wants us to do.
I like that word you said, man, moldable, you know, and I think another good word for that is also being adaptable, you know, being able to adjust.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
I think definitely we're in that process where things, I don't know, like you're right. I don't know if things will go back to being the
Right.
same or
Yeah.
if it's going to be a little different. That being
Right.
said,
Exactly.
I think we've adjusted. I personally do. I mean, I know some have struggled with the streams, but
Yeah.
I think overall, I think we have done a pretty good job in adjusting
Amen.
our you know, the way we work and everything like that, man.
Right. For
I
sure.
think it's been good, man. James, bro, it's been a great pleasure to have you. Uh,
Bro,
I'm
mine, bro, mine. God
very
bless you.
thankful, man. Very thankful to hear your testimony, the things you've gone through in life.
Thanks for having me on, man. I appreciate it. God, it's so good to see you, man. And we're gonna keep on praying for you guys, for your pops, for your mom, for your family, the church. And you know, it's a blessing to be able to have you guys in our lives one way or another, man. God bless you.
Amen, brother. God bless you and good luck over there in Portland.